Welcome everyone to this very special stream. Today, we're diving into a life-changing exploration of health, emotions, and the stories we carry within us. Beliefs and Stories, a thought-provoking documentary produced by the renowned Jeff Witzman, reveals the profound connection between emotional well-being and physical health. We'll uncover how unresolved trauma and suppressed emotions can impact the body, and discover the transformative power of performance healing. Prepare to challenge everything you thought you knew about wellness as we unlock the secrets to a healthier, more connected life. Don't miss this journey into the deep link between mind, body, and healing. Let's begin.
One of the questions that has plagued humanity since the beginning of time is why some people die and some people recover from the same illness, or why a treatment can go so well for so long and then stop working. Such is the dilemma I found myself in when my wife beat bladder cancer naturally by going to Germany and treating it with hyperthermia, IV nutrients, and ozone. She continued to live her life unrestricted, with only minimal recurrences for 4.5 years, largely on changed nutrition alone. Then, for no explainable reason, the cancer came roaring back. This time it spread to the femur bone, breaking her leg and forming a grapefruit-sized tumor that took her life in July 2020. What happened? She did everything right in terms of taking care of her immune system. The only explanation was that emotional issues and unresolved trauma from childhood put her in a weakened victim state that allowed her cancer to take over. But how is that possible? What is the evidence for emotional, spiritual issues or attitudes having any effect on our physical health? My quest for answers would begin in San Diego, California, with a performance healing specialist named Dr. Tommy John. Tommy's father was the pitcher Tommy John, who had the breakthrough surgery now commonly used to repair pitchers' arms. But Dr. Tommy John has sought to go beyond the medical model, and that's why he's been able to help so many athletes recover from injury.
Yeah, so this is interesting because my schooling was a bachelor's and master's in health and exercise science, and then chiropractic school. I still was like a black sheep in chiropractic school because there were some limitations there. I'm like, that's actually not how it works, you know, but who kind of runs the chiropractic school? What business accredits and is involved in the licensing of that? Well, you start going back down, like what do they want you to know? Do they want to promote an insurance model? Do they want to have a symptom-based care? Do they want to have you get out of your 200 grand debt, which is no school's worth that much? Do they want, yeah. So now do they want you to overcharge and do this and keep people? Yeah, Dr. Northrup last night talked to me. She's like, let's make one thing perfectly clear. Allopathic, pharmaceutical, dangerous. Labeling, okay. Holistic, vitamins, labeling, just as dangerous. And I loved it because I'm like, yes, that's what I've been saying. Our heart's in the right place, but it's just another prescription in this other. And what you do is, maybe there's no deaths caused by vitamin C or vitamin D or ozone or whatever, but you just disconnected the person from feeling what their true conversation is with their body, and you've extended out, and that disconnection then just drags it out even more, where maybe it's 3 years down the line, they have the body go, hey, I tried to get your attention before, only nobody's around in that 3 years because you're no longer with that person that you were working with. Now you feel like you let yourself down, you feel like you let that person down. The emotions that come with it are, this is impossible. I went the holistic route, and then holistic gets a bad, which is ultimately just nothing works. You're lucky to be healthy and you're lucky to be, you know, where you're at and happy and content. And I just don't like throwing that word around because the capacity, the possibility is always inside of all of us.
And I want to stop you for a second here and ask you about something you said, which is the body is trying to communicate with us. All right, now my wife got cancer.
Yeah.
She was treated holistically.
Yeah.
The cancer went away for 2 years. And then the cancer came back with a vengeance. What did we do? We did the same treatments, thinking the treatment is the solution.
Right.
But it wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't. The body was trying to say something. We didn't know how to listen to it.
Right.
And now you're telling me something new that the body is trying to communicate. Can you help us understand what that means?
Yeah, for sure. So it's always an intelligent process. Everything that goes on in the body is not random. There's an intelligence behind it. Heart rate speeds up, swelling, vomiting, fever, boils on the skin, yellowing of the eyes, an allergy response, fever, diarrhea, all the things you could possibly, metastasis, tumor, lump, hormone level down, cholesterol up, all these things that we've been programmed to think are us being sick, something's wrong with us. Well, wait a second. The intelligence in the body is doing something for what? To survive. It's its only job. Adapt and survive right now. If it gets your attention with a sensation, with a feel, because it heals if it feels. And it heals in the proportionate level of the feel. If it's a grand feel, there's some grand healing. If you want grand healing, you got to have grand feeling. So that's something that the way the antenna of the brain works. We need to get something into the body, a stimulus into the body greater than what caused the problem in the first place. So if we look at dis-ease as a sign of intelligence, you step back and your team of people that understand you as well, and you look and why would it do this? What's your story? Let's go into your story and go back before this all of a sudden happened, because whenever we see something that is an instant, oh, look at what's wrong with you. That was like a bunch of drops in the pail, and we look at the drop that spilled the pail over, and it's like, that drop right there. What was wrong with that? What did you do? Wait. What's the story of the person that filled that pail up? Let's go down that road. And this, from inception, from womb, we got to go through that whole, and then you start to put it together, and then it's literally this book written by you that makes total sense, and it puts the power inside yourself. And that is the greatest mark to healing. That is the greatest resource we have as facilitators, because we're not healers. We're just trying to get you to suggest the fact that your body heals itself and regenerates itself, but it needs to feel first. And if you look at it, that's what the medical establishment does. They disconnect you. They don't want you to feel anything. They don't want, everything's numb, everything's just out. You can't be sad, you can't be happy, you can't be down, you can't be, inflamed, you can't be acidic, you can't. Well, that's sign number one. And I'm not immune to it. I feel all the time, and not always fun. This morning, it was a rough morning. I had to go into some stuff, and I sat present with it. This is something I'm supposed to go through right now. It's literally one of the greatest conversations we can have in our lives is with ourselves through that symptomatic response, how the body talks to us. And I always say, the body will whisper. It starts with a whisper, and it's calm, and then it starts to get a little more aggressive, and it'll start yelling if you don't listen to the whisper. And when it's yelling, it's been talking to you for a really long time. It's okay. How do you discuss something with a yelling person? Do you come back at them? No, hold on. Force with force is just not going to happen. So when you start to look at it that way, it starts to make a little more sense with some of these situations that we place ourselves in, and then in essence, healing can start.
So now let me go the worst case scenario, someone who's had such trauma in childhood,
Yeah.
and then told to shut up about it. They cannot talk about it. And they've got this multiple double whammy. Are you telling me even the worst case scenarios can go back through that trauma, listen to everything that goes on, maybe reframe it? How do you see that process of the severe trauma turning this around?
So let's think about this. What you just described is pretty intense. Like on a meter, it's like an 11, right? Well, the stimulus to break that PTSD sort of approach needs to be greater than that. You're kidding me? I was orphaned or I was abused emotionally. Oh my gosh, I got to do that. I know, here we go. But that's where the belief in something greater than yourself, that's where your purpose, that's where the crew that you surround yourself with, that's where your rest and your nourishment and your prayer and meditation daily. That's why getting outside in the sun is like moving your body, getting everything ready, because we're about to go into some really crazy stuff together. But you're never alone, right? We're all going through this. We're good. Here's the support. But yes, in order to heal, we're gonna have to be honest and open about that. And when you go back through that and you retrace every injury, quote unquote, whether it's physical, chemical, emotional, on whatever level, they're all have an emotional concept to it. Whatever the injury is, we got to retrace back to the original. If it's a swollen ankle, chronic, 6 years later, we almost got to go back and like re-break it, literally, and go back in, and it's going to blow up. And then the emotional case that came with that. Now, here's how the body works. Time is whatever time is, whatever we've called it. When we're going back through that process, a lot of the time we're on this road of moving forward, and the body's like, I got ya, but you leveled up, your energy went out of this body, and what people will call death. You passed on at 86, but everyone's like, see, it didn't, but the body had you healing at like 108. It was like, maybe it would have, but here's the thing. Well, it's like, well, what's the point? But the whole road to that is life. Like, all systems are going to be doing better, that you're going to be enjoying the process along the way rather than suffering the process along the way. That's the thing. It's like, the healing dance is something that's magnificent. I mean, it truly is something to be celebrated. Is it painful? Hell yeah, it is. It's supposed to be, because there's other people going through it too. And that's the celebration, is the feel of that process. But I'll say it all the time, because they're like, oh, even if you put in, what will we consider perfect? Whatever perfect is. I mean, they go in and do everything you say. I mean, they bottom out, they go through. They're doing better, they're enjoying their life. They pass away. Everyone's like, damn, failure. No, I mean, that was a success all the way through. But if we look at success, failure as to when they're done, that's why healing's never done. When are we done with this? Why you do the stuff you do, TJ? Why? Because you're never done inputting and calibrating and feeling and taking an inventory and just trying to improve yourself. So every time I see you, if I do what I value in my life and I express the gratitude I can and the relationship I have with self, I should be better every single time I see you. I'm smarter. We had a conversation that maybe I mulled over. I was exposed to more. I've had dreams. I've had experiences. I've fallen. I've hurt. I've cried. I felt down. I felt up. Hell yeah, that's a more evolved person. What do you want to get into? That's the capacity that we could do. That every time you see somebody, you and he or she are better, higher, level, conscious. Damn, that's a bright future, regardless of what our time is.
Don't you go to war with yourself. I heard it come through the rain. Don't you go to war with yourself. How you gonna hold all that pain? Oh, no.
When I left Tommy's dojo, he told me I had to sit down with his doctor, Dr. Cassie Huckabee. Cassie started out in allopathic med school, but when she found herself so hampered by the Gardasil HPV vaccine and no answers in Western medicine to treat it, she had to look elsewhere.
Put down what you are carrying. Put down what you are carrying. Put down now.
Cassie found relief and a new way of looking at disease at an integrative clinic in West Texas that some called a voodoo doctor. Actually, an MD who had converted to natural treatment alongside a naturopath who also worked at the clinic. Cassie started seeing people get well for the first time, rather than just come back again and again for more medication.
What I started learning was my biggest, most concerning, troublesome symptoms, the ones that you want gone the quickest. They were the last to leave. And so what I did to kind of prove to myself that something was shifting that I couldn't see was I wrote down a list of everything that was wrong, from fingernails to hair that wasn't growing, to skin doing certain things, to heart palpitations, to vision, all of these things, and I just wrote it down. And then what I started realizing is that when I could go and cross one of those symptoms off, it was leaving in the reverse of how it came on. And so some of those biggest things that were most troublesome, they were the most recent, right? Because those are the things that actually got me motivated enough to make a change, right? And so all of these little things that I ignored, all up until that point, they were changing. And so had I not been paying attention to those and only focused on these big money items that were most concerning and taking all of my attention, I would have thought that it wasn't working. But then I could mark off something on my paper that said my nails are growing and they're not breaking. Interesting, okay? You know, my hair's growing. My skin's changing. I no longer need to use lotion. You know, all of these little tiny things. And so it started showing me that, you know, as these things come on in the body, they leave in the reverse. And so that's that patience, that's that understanding of the language of the body. How many things did you not listen to before it got to that? And even for me, I had to, you know, quit looking at this vaccine as something that did something to me. And so then it changed the game, because as long as I was afraid of that, as long as I was mad at that and thought about all of the ingredients, the adjuvants, all of those things in my body, it would almost immediately create even more symptoms. It would stir it up again. And so then for me, I had to be like, okay, I am still saying that something man-made can impact me. And then I'm sitting here saying and believing that I am something greater than all of this, that I can heal all of these things. I can heal anything. I was no longer afraid of cancer. I was no longer afraid of all of these things, but then I met this wall. And what I wanted was on the other side of this belief of the vaccine being this thing that I couldn't overcome. And so once I started going on that level, which is what led me to the quantum world, was, okay, that's man-made. I'm not man-made. So if I'm saying that I can be healthy despite these other types of inputs, everything's an input. And so then I had to start looking at how I was receiving all of these inputs and understanding that I am the quantum machine. And so yes, a vaccine was introduced into my physical body. And because I was unconscious and didn't understand, and certain things do have repercussions when you're not aware, I was susceptible to a response without my consciousness intact. And so that's the response I got. And so then I started learning that anything that you introduce into your field, into your biology, into your physical body, can have an input. Can being the very, very important word there. So why isn't it 10 out of 10 of every study that have a response? Why is there always a couple that don't have a response to the vaccine, to this pill, to this modality? And so then it started opening my mind to all of these things, and this is where I found my deepest healing. This is where I found my greatest time of unraveling, and it was because I was changing my stories, and I was changing my mind, and I was taking ownership of this world and my existence. And then it started giving me this unshakable sense of understanding, of seeing my world for the first time as how it truly is. If I can, you know, everything is an input, and then we'll have a response. And so why do some people even have good inputs, good, you know, natural, you know, a green juice or a supplement, and they have no response, right? So you can negate a good input, and you can also negate a bad input. And then you can enhance a good input, but you can also enhance a bad input. And when you're unconscious, you don't really get a say. You get to run off of what? Your programs, your susceptibilities, your genetic makeup, all of these things that are what? Potentials. And so then it started opening my mind to, yes, I had an input, but I don't have to play out that story anymore. I don't want to. It doesn't feel good. You know, I've lived it up until this point. Why not try on something else? And then when I started trying on a different story, a different way of believing, a different way of understanding, a different way of looking at research, a different way of looking at medicine, it all came back to me. I can enhance I can neutralize, or I can suppress, or I can just completely eliminate an input. Placebo, nocebo. That's where your power is. And so then it just completely changed the game. No longer did I need a supplement or a rigid diet or a daily routine that just kept me trying to feel in a certain way, because I changed in what I now understand as the field. I changed my field. I changed my experience. The person that experienced all of those things no longer exists. And the world she lives in now feels a lot different. And therefore your physiology, your biochemistry, the matter, the material change.
So did you get your body back?
I got my body back, and it has created something in me, you know, my vision. I'm 20/20. The wounds on my skin have healed. There's scars, but it's like nobody understands where they started and the story that's there. And, you know, the scoliosis that I had is corrected. My hair has grown back. My, you know, everything, I'm coordinated. I can swim, I can surf, I can do all of these things, right? All of it. And I would even say now I'm stronger than I was even when I was an athlete prior to the vaccine, because now I understand. And now I'm in a team, I'm aligned with this physical body, this physical being, with the understanding of how much is unseen and how much that actually matters. And if we understood those things that you can't see, even the things that we can't measure, even with the greatest tools, it's a game changer, and it changes this physical experience.
Okay, so let's see what this looks like in real life. When the idea for this film came about, there was one name that immediately came to mind: Ali Zek. I had never seen anybody come back from what Ali recovered from, and not just recover, but come out swinging against her abusers. Ali had been on psych medication for 20 years and almost lost her life.
They really started going at me on the drugs when I was in my mid-40s. And I think a combination of things had happened. By that time, I had accumulated a lot of trauma from my marriage and from other things happening in my life. And I had also, starting to go through menopause. There's some hormonal, I'm sure, imbalances going on. And then I had been on and off so many medications. Plus I had had numerous psychiatric stints at that point, hospital stays, and then as well as, multiple suicide attempts. So I had these layers that had come over me at that point that were really telling me something was wrong. I had a lot of shame and regret, just a lot of embarrassment that I had tried to kill myself so many times. And there's one thing I think that is, I can't think of anything worse than being a psychiatric patient that's been in a hospital and then getting out and having to go back in. That is, like, to me, the lowest that you can ever be in your life. And to, have your kids, witness you going through that multiple times. There's you don't have anything to be proud of anymore, because the way we treat, mental illness in this country, it's very stigmatized. But the way that we have intercepted it with Big Pharma has made it even more stigmatized and more deadly, because the drugs aren't helping, they're not working. But I was told they should be working, and that they did work on other people. So it was like just these layers of shame and guilt and trauma, on top of each other that I couldn't get out of.
Oh my God, tell me what it's like to be on these drugs and to not feel right and to feel like you have to end your life because it's just too wrong.
So if anyone has ever really attempted suicide on these drugs, it is not a cry for help. It is a I want to end my life type of situation, because your brain is so combustible at that point. And like I said, I had all these layers that were reverberating and running, my subconscious now. Plus the drugs were producing psychosis, which is what those drugs can do to people. And so it was an intolerable situation. It was not only intolerable mentally, but physically. I had akathisia where I shook all the time. I stuttered. I had no depth perception. I couldn't be around bright lights. Loud noises would scare me. So it was just like, what is the point of living? And it was so intolerable that I, got to the point, one of my attempts was in the hospital, or two of them were, and I took I think 2 days to take really cheap bed sheets from the hospital and rip them. The nurses were right around the corner, but I would cough and I would rip these sheets. And I, would hide. Then when I would leave the room to go to group or to eat, I would hide, the nest I had made under the mattress. And it was definitely, an intention, because it took me that long to do it, and I had to hide. And then it just, your brain's on fire. And I took the sheets, made a rope, knotted everything together, and then there was a bolt on the window holding up like a valance, and I put the rope through that. And I stepped off the ledge, and it didn't hold.
And how many times did you try?
I think I had 5 attempts. Wow. And I will say, though, that one of them was actually after I had come off the drugs, too. My last one, I wasn't even on the drugs. And that was kind of a mind bender for me, because I had always blamed the drugs. I had always blamed that my psychosis and my suicide attempts were on the drugs, which I definitely think played a huge part. But I think that the trauma and the patterns and the drugs had made such an imprint on me, on my psyche, that I, the last attempt was where I was separated from my husband, and there was a lot of gaslighting going on, a lot. I was, really asking for clarification on our relationship, and he had a new relationship behind my back, and I, would be on my knees asking him, just tell me the truth. I just need to know the truth. If you could just give me the truth, it's fine. I just need to know the truth. And it was very much, cutting me off from my children, or trying to, painting me to be the crazy one, which I had a good track history of being too. So it was, easy for that to set in. But that last attempt was when I wasn't even on any drugs. And then I had even, more shame and guilt after that one, because like I said, I'd always blamed it on, the drugs.
I want to get to your awakening now, how you somehow got the impetus to call somebody on the East Coast and say, I want some help. And that must have taken a lot of fortitude just to make that phone call. Tell me about that.
Well, so it was like 2 weeks after my last attempt in the hospital on the drugs. And I had actually gone cold turkey off the drugs twice without knowing that that's really dangerous. And they just were, intolerable to my body, to my being. And so I was seeing a new therapist here in Kansas City, and she just had read a book that had literally just come out. And it was Kelly Brogan's book, and A Mind of Your Own. And she said, I think you should just go see this doctor in New York City. And at the time, my family was looking for long-term care facilities to put me in, because I was so out of control. I couldn't be by myself. And so I called. It really wasn't hard, because, when I met Kelly, I think one of the first things I said to her is, I will drink my own urine to heal. I will do whatever you tell me to do to heal. And so I have a soft spot for Kelly.
How does that feel to save somebody's life?
I did not save her life. And I tell her that all the time, and she jokes now about it. I did not, We probably have some beautiful karma, wherein we were able to fully express ourselves through each other, you know? And she, you know, she resolved her acute symptoms and was off medications a couple of months after my meeting her. But the work that she did, I would say over the following 2 years, was gnarly, okay? Very intense work.
So I walked into her office in New York. She's all these degrees all over the wall. You know, very intimidating. But then she came out. She's just the most down-to-earth, most precious person. Just so inviting, so engaging, and so real. And she spent, you know, I think she spent longer with me that day than any accumulation of appointments, you know, any psychiatrist had ever spent with me in the past, you know, over 2 decades. And then she said to me, she said, "You're not mentally ill. You know, you're not." And I think I really took that in, although I couldn't accept it at that time, but something really deep inside of me, you know, took that in and really, you know, imprinted it inside my soul. And I just really hung on to that for a long time because I wasn't by no means out of the woods after I saw her, not even close. But it was like she kind of wove this thread. She unraveled a lot of old threads for me, you know, of what I'd been told and what I'd come to believe and to know. And she unraveled a lot. And then she kind of, you know, started threading a new story for me. You know, I built on that after that.
What types of other things was she saying you needed to address?
At the time, I did not realize that I had so much trauma. And I also didn't realize that I was in an abusive marriage. I just didn't know any better. It very much mirrored, you know, my childhood, which I thought was really idyllic. I thought it was a really good childhood, but chaotic. And so we didn't really address that in her office or, you know, as a patient. That came later. But we addressed my, you know, my lifestyle. We addressed my my diet. And, you know, I walked out of her office and changed my diet immediately. And I had no idea what I was doing, 0 clue. And literally walked across the street, ordered dinner, and ordered it the way she told me, you know, I needed to eat. So it was a very profound and significant change. But it was it's been a journey of the darkest night of my soul. I can't even begin. Like I said, I even had another suicide attempt after I met Kelly, after I come off of all the drugs. That it was a descent into absolute just darkness that I did not know a human being was capable of going into and then coming out of.
What kept you alive during that time? Why were you able to somehow persist through the hours of throwing up, of just heaving, of going through this gnarly darkness? What kept you going through it?
I didn't feel close to God at all. You know, I can remember I had a kind of a ritual that I would do for, I don't know how many years, where I would get on my hands and knees and I would beg God not to forget about me. I was just like, please don't forget about me. So I'm not really sure. I mean, I think it just is this very, very deep knowing that I know is God now. You know, I know that now. Sounds cliche, but this old story that he carries you, although you may not realize. I do believe fully, though, that God had intended for me to go through all of that. And I accept that now, and I'm okay with that now.
Was there any kind of a determined attitude, a little girl in there that felt like, I will not let them bury me?
Yeah, I didn't know who we were talking about, but I know it was, it was kind of like a fuck you. I will not be conquered. Definitely there is something deep inside of me that think I've always kind of been like that. I'm an extremely sensitive, very empathetic person, but I also have a little bit of, or not a, I mean, I have a lot. I have a lot of grit. And so if someone tells me that I'm not going to be able to do something, I'm usually the person that's going to go show them that I can. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of just a lot of fortitude, a lot of like stubbornness maybe that I refused to be conquered. Mm-hmm.
Love it. So the theme we've been talking about with everybody in this film is that we all have a story, and then we have a belief about our story, and we can change our belief about our story. As you've gone through the last 5 or 6 years and gone on your healing journey, what types of things have you been able to change in terms of your beliefs about your story?
Oh, that it was the best thing that ever happened to me in the world. I reached a point, this was not that long ago, it was maybe like a month ago, just a thought came to me, that easy button, I think it was for like an office, some office supply, the red easy button. I was like, well, if there were a red button that I could push to do this all over exactly the way it happened, exactly how it turns out, I'd push it in a heartbeat. Because the growth, and it really demonstrated to me the capacity of the human spirit when they are determined to do something, and when they really can open up, get rid of all the layers, right, that are clouding our vision, get rid of the veil that is separating us from God. If we can really get down to that source level and connect with, our higher power and our higher self, there's nothing the human spirit can't get over. Nothing. So I would do it all over in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. I would just tell people that we have to stop being scared of pain. Our world and our culture and our society is so pain adverse. And we really see pain as this terrible thing. And I did. I lived my life like that we need to avoid at all costs. So we do everything we can to avoid pain. We will, create these really gnarly addictions to people, which I did with my ex-husband, or to substances, to psychiatric medications, to religion, to anything that can keep us away from just really, really going into that pain. And I think my turning point was when I really started to stop resisting the pain and kind of do this dance with it and invite it in and, not be scared of it anymore. I remember when I first got that feeling, I would kind of be pissed off and I would pretend like it was this like tornado behind me. And I would, picture myself walking down this dirt road and I could hear this thunder and this, huge wind coming behind me. And I knew that was, pain or fear. And I would turn around and I would be like, what do you want? And I'd kind of be this like, real like bravado, like, get away from me. I'm not scared of you. And then over time, it kind of morphed into this like, hey, you're here. How are you? And what do you want to show me? And it was not so like I'm repelling it, but I'm learning to work with it. I'm asking it, I'm inquiring, I'm curious, what are you here to show me? And then you get to a point where you understand how this works so well that even though you're going through pain, you're going to get something out of it. Because every time I've been into a really dark place through my awakening, every time I know now, it works like clockwork, that every time I go into that really dark place, I know that when I come out of it, I'll hit another level. I'll reach a higher level of understanding and awareness, and then the pain lessens. I go through it in such a shorter phase, but I always get some new, awareness or, growth out of it somehow.
I love it.
I can hardly explain it. We can hardly explain why we feel so small. I can hardly explain it. We can hardly explain how to hold it all. Spending any given day in a ball curl. But could I see you sometime?
Let's continue following this thread by getting some perspective from a medical doctor who understands a broader sense of the mechanism behind trauma and disease. Dr. Christiane Northrup began her career with a clear purpose of adding what was missing. Things like women's wisdom and information that comes in dreams. Dr. Northrup pointed me to a study that had been done years ago, which since has been buried because it doesn't fit the allopathic business model, that clearly shows the relationship between trauma and disease.
And we know from the very famous ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which I'll never forget seeing for the first time. It was started at Kaiser in San Diego by a guy named Vincent Felitti. And he ran the weight loss clinic. And he was noticing that the people who were successfully losing weight stopped. They were the ones that stopped dead, even though they were being successful. And he overhears a young woman who was 18, who had gained 100 pounds in the last couple of years. And she said, overweight is overlooked. And that's what I want to be, because she had been raped. And out of that, he then created the database for the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, and he took something like 55,000 middle-income people in San Diego County. And he found that over half of them had one or more adverse childhood experiences: depressed mother, seeing a parent beaten, mental illness in someone, a chronically ill sibling. There's a whole list, a divorce, all of these things. The more adverse childhood experiences you have, the greater your risk, and it's quantitative, the greater your risk of emergency room visits, the greater your number of prescriptions, and the more chance of an early death. In the late 80s, Dr. Candace Pert, who was a friend of mine, discovered endorphins and enkephalins. She discovered the chemicals that the brain makes when it thinks. The neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, all of that, right? These are the molecules of emotion that actually contribute either to cellular inflammation or lack of cellular inflammation. So we finally had the mechanism. Let's say you're a little kid and you watch your father beating your mother, and you are little and you really want to save her and you're scared to death. All right, what happens? This is a shock to that little kid. It's overwhelming, actually. So the kid goes into a state of shock, but the body begins to produce huge amounts of the stress hormones, cortisol and epinephrine. And then the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system gets engaged. This begins to create what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body. Or in the shamanic way of thinking, it creates a split in the soul. So a part of your soul stays stuck in the past. Now, how do you dissolve a pain body? How would you do that for a little kid? Here's how it would work. Because everybody is going to have some kind of trauma in their life, right? But the way you would dissolve that incipient pain body is you would just stay with the child and be present. The human presence dissolves the pain body. But who had that in their family? No, because your parents had their unresolved stuff, and it goes on, it goes like, back for 7 generations, where we repeat the pattern and repeat the pattern and repeat the pattern until someone finally says, okay, what happened to you? Then what you have to do. So I want people to understand this. I learned this from Dr. Doris E. Cohen. It was very popular in the 80s to do this inner child work. Let's take your inner child to work. And people would bring in teddy bears, and I'd be thinking, oh, please, no, let's not do this. What she taught me was, This unhealed part, let's say age 7, that's traumatized and in a state of fight or flight with those stress hormones that increase cellular inflammation, especially in the face of sugar. Especially, what do we do when someone's hurt? Oh, well, we'll go for ice cream. We'll go for pizza. Don't worry, honey, we'll all go for ice cream. All right, so remember that sugar increases beta endorphin in the body, which actually decreases pain. We know that if you give rats sugar, they will keep their paws on a hot plate longer. So that's a drug. That's a drug. And it's okay, we'll give you a treat, and then, that will make the pain go away. So what happens is the inner 7-year-old continues to run your endocrine, immune, and central nervous system. This is key. It is key. So what you have to do is, you're now an adult. You got to go in and you got to be the parent, the responsible one to that inner 7-year-old. It doesn't take any time at all. We can go through it right now, but you can also find, it's called the 7 Steps of Rebirth, and it's on the website of DrDorisECohen.com. But it's basically this. You take a deep breath in, you exhale so that it's a little longer than the inhale. That automatically brings in the parasympathetic rest and restore nervous system. All right, so when we do that, all the way out, and then you see a stop sign in your mind's eye, stop, you're doing it again. And then you pick a number between 1 and 10. And then you just go down, close your eyes, you go into this beautiful magic garden, and the stop sign, stop, you're doing it again, you pick a number, then you go into this beautiful garden, and there are flowers, and there's water, and there's angels, and you're totally protected. And then you meet that inner 7-year-old in the garden. And many times, and what's so great is, it's right there. It's right there. People will tell me, okay, well, the 7-year-old's not going to come over to them. They're pissed. You weren't there for me. No one was there for me. Then you try to get the kid to come over. You try to say, I love you. I am never going to abandon you again, because we all abandoned parts of ourselves way back. And our job is to integrate those parts, bring it back. That's what soul retrieval is in the shamanic tradition. But you can do it on your own. And so then you bring the kid over. I love you. I'm never going to abandon you again. But right now, I need to take my leave, but I'll be back. This is crucial. I'll be back. Because you're not really good at driving. It's not good for you to take the wheel of my life right now. I've got to be an adult. And then what you do, you say, okay, I'm going to take my leave and I'll be back. You take a deep breath. You come back into the present, feet on the floor. You state the date, your name, and where you are. Because you are now grounding yourself in the here and now. And then for 40 days, you go back for 40 days, and you go and you see that child in the garden. Now, I did that because I was working with Doris on dreams. And she said to me, because I had talked about my divorce, and I said, the way it went down, I felt like, there was a bullet in my heart and a knife. And she says to me, oh, there is, it's still there. So go back in the magic garden and work with the self you were at the time of that trauma. And I'll never forget it. I went back into did that process. I saw myself laying there, and she said, and like a surgeon, you got to sew up the wound and all that. I go back and I realize, no, I can't sew this up. It needs to be packed. So I need to pack the wound. I knew exactly what to do. And 40 days, I would be, in many days, I'd just be in bed, like comatose. I'd go into the magic garden, nothing's happening, she's asleep. And then finally, after 40 days, that part of me that was creating a separate pain body. You know, the pain body would be, okay, I'm now a middle-aged divorced woman whose husband is marrying a younger woman and they're having a baby. You know, that's like an archetypal story. And I thought, oh, good, I'm a middle-aged woman living alone with cats. Wonderful. You know, but then I would say, I'm not going to do that trip. I'm going to heal that part of me so that I don't continue that narrative through the rest of my life. That's not going to be me. But I would go back and heal the part of me that could be me, because people are very stuck often at a developmental stage. Like, for instance, the reason that you get this other thing that happens with mothers and daughters, at, let's say when the daughter goes through adolescence, and you see it in movies all the time, where, you know, the girl rolls her eyes at her mother and is nasty to her mother. Very common, you know, like, oh, Mom, you know, you're going to wear that, and, you know, and I saw that happening in my house. It's like, oh no, we're going to extinguish that behavior right there. We're not doing that trip. I know that trip. Here's what that trip is. The mother never went through adolescence and got over her own wounds of the 8th grade. So she's going to try to enroll her daughters as friends so they can fit in. So she is not a mother. She's not a parent figure. She's still looking for the acceptance that she never got in middle school, which, by the way, when you get your period, you should really have a coming of age ceremony. That's starting to happen now in a big way, but it didn't happen for a whole lot of women. So their 50th birthday party becomes their coming of age ceremony. This is like another archetype. Anyhow, that's one way that you stop the inflammation, because what we're doing always is you have this, you know, you've got a raw nerve inside you. It's like a phantom limb. You know, the people who have a limb cut off, but they still feel it and it hurts because the limb, the whole part of them is saying Marco, and they're looking for the limb to say Polo, but they're not saying Polo. When you do this inner child work as an adult, it's remarkable. It's all there. In other words, you don't have to go back digging. It's there right now. And then you can also do dream work, you know, and pay attention to dreams and all of that. And everyone in a dream is an aspect of you, that kind of thing. So there's a million ways to put that link together, but I think the very first one is this. And this is the point of power that I have tried my whole career to get in front of people. There's a 1970s transactional analysis triangle. I call it the Bermuda Triangle, right? So it's victim, persecutor, rescuer. Victim, persecutor, rescuer. If you find yourself in that triangle, and we all do at some point, and yes, people are victimized, my God, of course they are, but your power comes with the 10,000-foot view. And then when you feel like you have some power and you're not powerless, the cellular inflammation of fear, the cellular inflammation of helpless, hopeless goes away, because then you are accessing a power greater than your own ego. And every story you ever hear about someone who overcame cancer or paraplegia or anything, they did it by the hard, soul-searching work of finding out where their power lay. And the power is within. And then also, you remember when Rhonda whatever came out with The Secret, right? And so we all said, oh God, all we need to do is make a vision board. If we just make a vision board and we'll get the man of my dreams in this wedding, and there's a swimming pool and a big mansion, and then we can have everything we want. Not so simple. It's not so simple, because you have, I don't know what it's called, but it's samskara or something. There will be the burning away of what you think will make you happy. the burning away of what you think. I was listening to a guy on a YouTube video, and he said, what you begin to find is that it is gratitude and service to others that's better than a hot fudge sundae. It's better than a big house. It's better than a fancy vacation. I mean, what have we had for the past, 25, 30 years? The Disney solution to all of your stress. Don't worry if you just go to Disney, and then you can come back to your miserable life after that and then prepare for the next thing that just takes the pressure off. You open the valve a little, pressure's off just enough so that you don't have to change anything. And I'm here to tell everyone that our job is to figure out how to live heaven on earth. Now, this is a gangster planet, let's be clear. It's not an easy place to live. I once had a reading with someone who channeled Dwal Khul, the Tibetan. It was a really cool reading. And what she said was, the earth is it's matter, mother, the densest place in the universe, or maybe at least in our solar system, who knows. She said, so when you can make a change in consciousness on the earth, it changes the entire universe, which is why everyone wants this planet. And there's all those, there's all that mythology of the Anunnakis coming here from gold and all of that stuff. Yeah, that's fun to look at. I'm very interested in, the here and now. So think about it as a symbol, the instrument, the symbol. If you can do this around a symbol, you can move the air, nothing happens. You bang that sucker, and the air all around it vibrates. It goes out into the universe. We're here to change this matter. And when we change this and we get it in a higher vibration, less cellular inflammation, then we are changing our frequency. And that would be love, forgiveness, gratitude. That's the way you change your frequency. Yeah, you can do some green juice and all the rest of it. But the most important is changing your frequency, because I have seen guys who eat hot dogs and hamburgers and drink beer who have a much more loving frequency than fundamentalist vegans. There's fundamentalism in every walk of life. And that's not what we want. So gratitude, love, helping others, that's where the fun stuff is at. But not self-sacrifice. And a lot of people who are going to be watching this movie are what I would call old soul empaths. We're born with a negative ego. We keep looking for things to improve about ourselves, to feel good about ourselves. And we're controlled by the narcissists who are born with a superior ego. So our job is to love ourselves and get off the train of trying to get what Oracle Girl calls the high frequency negative beings. Those are the people who, the dark controllers, the psychopaths. That's about 1 in 100 people, by the way. They work by being larger than life, usually way better looking than other people, very charismatic, and you want to be around them. This is like the whole Hollywood celebrity trip. Oh my God, if we could just be like them. It's a trap. It's a total trap. Celebrity is nothing. As my favorite movie, one of my favorite, Almost Famous, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Kid, I'm not cool. I'm here on a Saturday night. And by the way, the only currency between two human beings that's worth anything is what happens when they're not being cool. And that's where you have to go to heal this part of you. So years ago when we started Women to Women, we got to the point where we were as burnt out as we had been in our conventional practices, but we couldn't blame the guys running the practice because here we are. And I said, we have met the enemy and she is us. So we all went to an Ann Wilson Schaaf Living in Process workshop. Okay, so imagine, you're all sitting around in a circle, and when someone would have an issue, they'd hit the mat. They'd get down on a mattress and wail. And the deal was, this is important. You don't go over and hug them. You sit there as a presence which is dissolving the pain body, and you let them go all the way in and all the way out. And movement, sound, and tears. That's how we do the digestion of the pain body. And then you just hand them Kleenex, and they come out of it after making those sounds. And I've been hearing a lot, like, you know, Lori Ladd was talking about these sounds in the shower where she was just sort of losing it. You come out and you're in a different frequency because you've digested a piece of the pain body. And so we're all doing that now. And I remember we all went out because I had a partner who we suspected was alcoholic, but I didn't know that. So Ann was going to do an intervention. So the parts of an intervention, classically, you tell the addict how much you love them. You tell them what their addiction is doing to the family or the organization. And then the third step is you lay down the law. These are the boundaries. You keep it up and you can't come back to work, or you keep it up and you're cut off from the family money, or you keep it up, whatever. So we didn't get to that till like day 8 or 9, and I'm like, come on, you know, let's, you know, we got to do this intervention. That's why we came here, and everyone's around, you know, and I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, you poor people, Jesus, you've got a lot of trauma. I felt like I was in labor and delivery, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, okay, you got a lot of pain, all that. We then get to the time for the intervention. And Ann sits us in a circle. She's in the middle. I'm telling my partner, I have to tell her how much I love her and what, you know. And I start to tell her how much I appreciated when she parked my car when I was in labor with my second child. Back then, women didn't help women too much. So to have a female colleague who actually came in and said, okay, get on the car and you go up to labor and delivery. And I began to cry. So I knew, okay, so Ann says, you want to go down, you know, lie down and see what comes up? I lie down. And then, like a pro that I was, don't ask for a lighter pack, ask for a stronger pack. I push it down. I push it, nope, I'm good. Nope, I can handle it. Ann Schaaf looks at me. She says, you're so tired. And I never, ever, ever had a woman give me permission to be tired. And I got down on that mat. I wailed for an hour. I made sounds like at that wailing wall, like they do in the Middle East. I remember the part of me is the witness self is going, wow. And I wept for all the times my mother didn't rest. And I wept for all the times I didn't rest. And then there was a trap door. And I went down. And I was wailing for every mother who ever lost a baby, the pain of all women. And when I came back out of it, I knew why I came to Earth. It was to transform that into joy.
Hello, the old me. I know you're feeling angry. Promise you're not going crazy. The world will keep on turning. So just keep breathing. You're alive. Open your eyes. You're alive. Feel that sunrise. And when it all moves fast, you lose track. And when you feel it'll last, then you look back. You're alive. Yeah. You're alive.
After hearing about the psych med industry and how ineffective it's been, I wanted to hear from a holistic psychiatrist, Dr. Joe Yee, to find out how he manages his practice to really help people.
It's interesting how it's always the most beautiful, most attractive people coming in to try to sway me to a different way of thinking. And this one lady came in, and I remember she said, Dr. Yee, we have a report here of this one particular medication that you're prescribing, and it's the dosage that you're prescribing is a lot lower compared to the rest of the doctors and psychiatrists in your community. And not only the dosage is lower, but the quantity that you're prescribing is a lot lower as well. So let's just say that the average dose of the medication that's being prescribed is about 100 milligrams, okay? So she's saying that I'm prescribing about 25 milligrams a day, which is not efficacious, and that could be doing a lot of harm to people instead of benefiting them. And I'm like, well, my clients are doing just well with just this little bit, but all the holistic remedies that I'm recommending for them. So how could you say that this is like irresponsible or dangerous in any way? She goes, yeah, but the studies, based on our big pharma reports, are showing that this medication is efficacious at 100 milligrams plus. So you're really not giving the therapeutic dose, and that could be dangerous for your clients. So I said, okay, we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this. And I was very polite. So then she came back and she said, look, I have a proposal for you. How about I take you out to dinner and I have a special guest who would love to meet you and speak to you about some of the things that are going on. So at the time I said, sure. So I go to this very elaborate, lavish restaurant, steak and lobster place. And I go there and I see 2 drug reps and my old mentor from residency. I haven't seen this guy in years. I'm like, oh my God, Dr. So-and-so, great to see you. And he's like, good to see you, Joe, please have a seat. So I'm the center of attention here, you know, the drug reps and my mentor in front of me, and I'm very confused of what this is all about. And he goes, I've heard, Joseph, that you've been doing some very disturbing things in our community. Like, what do you mean? Well, I heard that you are someone who's trying to help people come off of prescription medications. I'm like, yeah, isn't that an honorable thing? Like, isn't that the ideal situation, that a person could feel well in their mind and their body without having to take all these chemicals? He goes, ideally, yes, but there are a lot of people that are hurting out there, they're struggling out there, and they could benefit from these medications. And by you trying to take them off of these meds, that could potentially lead to suicide, that could lead to them feeling very depressed and going back to their drugs, and then they could OD and they could die. So you're posing a very dangerous situation to our community. And I said, look, man, I know you have a daughter. Would you want your daughter to be on all these chemicals? And he goes, well, if they were, suffering, of course I would. And I said, okay, but what if we could do it, you're settling for the bronze here. What if we could go for the gold? What if I could take people off of all these meds, allow them to become their #1 healthcare providers where they don't really need us and they could flourish on their own? Wouldn't that be the gold or the platinum? And he goes, look, here's something that you need to consider. I need you to start considering the joy of maintenance. And at that point, I said, all right, nice to meet you, peace. And then I looked at the drug reps and I said, you guys will never be allowed to come back to Modern Behavioral, and I bounced. And since then, no drug reps are allowed to come into our holistic behavioral health practice. Absolutely not.
As I work with other folks recovering from disease, the same victimizing story comes up over and over: sexual abuse. How does one recover from it without being trapped underneath it? Carrie and I were both sexually abused. Why did I survive and she die? It felt like it was time to hear more about my own process of recovery to make sense of it all. So I asked my friend Brian to sit down with me.
Just to jump in, what happened in childhood? If you just want to start with that.
Yeah, so my father was an anesthesiologist, and he was also kind of a scary German guy, multiply addicted. And when I came out of the womb, I know I was really terrified of this guy. And one of the medical conditions I had was that I had a testicle that dropped late. And I'm sure it was because I was so frightened of this guy. I was like sucking everything in my body to try to retain my manhood, thinking that was the way to do it. And so my father, not knowing there would be a problem, would examine me, because he was terrified of this whole testicle dropping late thing. I don't know if he thought that he wasn't gonna have an heir to the family, or if he thought there was some imperfection with his kid, but somehow he felt it necessary that he had to examine me.
up until the age of 16 when my testicle finally dropped. And now this is a guy who was multiply addicted. So alcohol, drugs, sex, making lewd comments to the women in the family, telling dirty jokes at dinner. This is the guy who has his hands on my balls for 16 years of my life. And it would go like this. He would say, Jeffrey, take off all your clothes and lie on the bed. And then he would proceed to examine me with that furrowed brow, that look of fear on his face, and he would poke and prod, and it was painful. And I would just lie there just thinking, what the hell is going on, you know? And then he would get up from that experience and he would just say, okay, put your clothes back on and leave the room. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened here? And this went on from 0 to 16. So you can imagine what happened for me is I just left my body. I'm like, this is, I cannot sit with this. There's no one to mirror this, to make me feel okay about it. I mean, I ran to mother for safety, but I was terrified. And so what happened for me is I split off. And now there was a new Jeff. Authentic self Jeff, gone. No contact with this guy at all because it was way too painful. So now I have fantasy life Jeff. And this is where I lived my entire life until I was the age of 27, which was the beginning of my awakening. And here's a fantasy, right? And if I can please enough people, if I can achieve enough, I can get this dream. I can get my fantasy life and put all this shit behind me. And so that was the dilemma of my childhood.
So tell me kind of as an adult what the trauma response was like.
Right, so my first reaction as a 23-year-old was, I thought, I must have done something wrong back there. It's my fault. Okay, my bad. I should have probably been different with my father to get his love. And okay, my bad. I'm gonna pick a woman who's just like my father, and this time I'm gonna get it right, right? And this is all unconscious, because I'm not aware of this. But I pick a woman who's multiply addicted. Same thing, alcohol, drugs, sex, and we get married. It's not so great. Within 3 years, she's having an affair with my best friend. Boom. That marriage done, exploding. So now I get into therapy, the awakening starts happening. A couple years later, a few years later, I find a woman who's able to be honest with herself about herself. I mean, the greatest of all characteristics in a relationship. And we get married. And with her, I can have this thing, right? I'm still not in authentic self Jeff, but I can have this thing, which is the fantasy life that I always dreamed of, which is the perfect woman, the perfect family, put all this shit behind me, right? So we get married, and shortly after we get married, a friend of mine says, Jeff, you know, you ought to try porn. We've been told by Christians that porn is bad. That's not true. Actually, it's neither good nor bad, it just is. And I'm like, wow, that is a really progressive thought. I like that. I should try porn. So I try porn and I can't stop. I'm addicted. I'm addicted to porn. And I tell my wife about it and she's like, she's crying. And she's like, I don't want to hear about this. Go get help. So I go get help. I get into a program of recovery. And now, and by the way, the reason I'm addicted to porn is because this fantasy, I achieved it. I got the woman of my dreams. I'm starting the family. And you know what? It's not adding up. It's not feeling good. This is not working. I'm like, oh my God, I've got to find some way to comfort myself that it's not working. So there's the birth of the addiction. All right, so I get into a program of recovery for addiction. And now I'm feeling like I got one arm tied behind my back, right? Because I got no way to cope. I'm angry all the time. I'm resentful. I'm like, what happened? What did I do wrong? And then pretty soon I run into trouble with people in my life leaving me. And so my other arm, which is control,
right? Just control this world to get what you need. That's been taken away. Now that's not working. So now I got two arms tied behind my back, metaphorically. And I'm like, how does anyone survive this life? I don't have any tools. So I have to grow a third arm, right? And the way to grow the third arm for me was to sit with all those feelings, to sit with the resentment, to sit with the inability to control, and just wait for the answers to come. And I mean, initially, it was a lot of anger and a lot of rage, which then moved into grief and a lot of, oh my God, I will not survive this grief. It's just too intense. But as I do that, there's a saying in the big book of AA, which is acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. As I accept all those feelings, this third arm starts to grow, and I come up with a new way to go through life. Now we're backing off of this finally, right? We're finally getting close to the authentic self. And with that comes freedom, comes power, comes real love. And I realized that my attempts to control everything and manage it with addictions were actually keeping me from power, keeping me from freedom, keeping me from love. And so that's the benefit. So the drawback is you're like, oh my God, I got to live with these feelings. The benefit, though, is with every day you're doing that, you're getting more freedom, more power, more love. So this is feeling great to me. And then things happened with Carrie.
When Carrie left, what kind of, talk us through kind of what went through for you?
Yeah, oh my God. I had no idea what was going to happen when I lost a relationship, a very loving relationship of 29 years, and she's just gone. And what happened for me, I did not expect this. Hey man, I've been in recovery for, 28 years plus. I'm good. She dies, everything comes flooding right back in. The sex abuse with dad, the running to mom, I have to change myself to get mom's love. And now I'm waking up every day after she's died. Not only do I have the grief of losing that relationship, but now all this arrested development that I've never really taken responsibility for, which is, I gotta go back to the scene of the crime. I gotta take responsibility for this shit. So what happened for me, and I'm praying, I'm asking God help me through this because I have no idea how to deal with this. And what I learned was I could go into a meditative state, go back to that moment where little Jeff is lying on the bed. And I chose him at 5 years old. And he's lying there naked on the bed. And Bob has told him to lie down. And I go back in a meditative state, and when Bob walks in the room, I stop him right there. And I say, Bob, you don't need to be here right now. I know you're afraid. I know you're terrified of whatever's going on with him, with that testicle dropping late, but he is gonna be okay, and you're gonna be okay. It's not okay for you to touch him. I need you to leave the room and get out right now. And I usher him out the door, close the door. And then I sit on the bed with little Jeff and hug him. And, this is the moment when the reconnection happens with higher self Jeff and little Jeff. And we start to feel safe for the first time. And I just sat there for a long time with him, and I continue to sit there often with him.
Put on your red shirt off the gray and cancel all your plans today, 'cause it might not be coming back. And though you built this house in heaven's hands and a steel fence strong as 10 commands, you still roll your road to freedom. Stand above and look beyond. There's more than everything we depend upon, yeah.
And I would say about a month later, I suddenly felt like, you know what? I want to bond with my father again. I want to bond with the real father, not the guy that came in the room. And so I just threw that out to the universe. I said, God, Dad, I want to meet you in your authentic self state, not the guy that was addicted and afraid. And at the end of a yoga class during Shavasana, I'm laying there, and my father just moves right in. He's about 40, 45, smiling, happy, confident. He comes right up to me. He's not forcing anything. He's just smiling. He's like, hey, Jeff. And I run up to him and hug him, and he hugs me. And I just say, you know, I want to be on the same team with you. and I got to have that. I got to have that. And he's with me now, you know, and we're a team. And so this has been the journey for me. And I would say in the last 6 months since all this has happened, I'm in another spiritual plane that I've never been in before. I'm in a place now where synchronicity's happening. And I just had to clear away all that stuff to get this connection to God just super tight right now. And I never thought it was possible. Like, how do you strip this stuff away? But if you do strip it away, oh my God, there's freedom, power, love, and this connection to God that I never thought was possible. So that's what's happened since Carrie died.
I've always felt like allopathic medicine abdicates personal responsibility for the work needed to stay healthy. And to get more on that, I met with Dr. Thomas Cowan, who's been challenging every tenet of Western medicine, including with his seminal book, The Contagion Myth, to find where true health really lies. The first place he went to in our conversation was how important water is to health.
Everything to do with health and illness and why you get sick and how you get better has to do with the integrity of your water. And that includes, like, not just the water, but whether you have the right minerals, because the coherence is formed around the minerals, or whether you have the right proteins, or whether you have the right amino acids. So there's that side. Working with the energy from the world. So have you been in the sun enough? Do you have healthy relationships and emotions that are toxic? When you have something amiss with that, then the system doesn't work right. It's not coherent. The radio is out of tune, and we call that 486 different diseases, depending on what the form was. And interestingly, if you go back to what you can really show is most of the tissues are not even organized in compartments. They're just syncytia, or like a big block of jello with some mitochondria and nuclei in it. And when it's poisoned, like with glyphosate or negative emotions or thoughts or EMFs, then it forms itself into a protective form called a cell. That's what we call cancer. It's just the cell going from this coherent tissue state into little, it's like making little garbage cans, to hoping for a better day. And so if you think like that, you can then easily understand why, like detoxifying, like with coffee enemas, might help, or helping with having better emotions might help, or using frequencies like a Rife machine might help, or supplementing with minerals, because if you don't have the right minerals, you will absorb heavy metals to compensate. And so if you give the person enough minerals, they just naturally get rid of the heavy metals. You can understand why chelating heavy metals might help. You can understand why therapies for the, quote, etheric body, which is the water body, might help. You can understand why sweating might help. You can understand the entire history of sweat lodges and shamanic healing, changing the energy pattern. all these begin to make sense. And homeopathy, which essentially works with the stored memory in water, you change the pattern and it starts to make sense. Unfortunately, most people, even those who work with these modalities, they're stuck in the old biology, and so therefore they don't understand really what they're working with, and so it doesn't work as well as it should. Because what I found, the most important thing, it turns out, is the conception of the person, what they're thinking, and how they see the world. Like, I have no trouble, or had no trouble, treating somebody with strep throat, except if they were determined that this was a simple bacteria that infected them and they were just a victim. If they think that, I can't help them. If they think, yeah, it's part of the regeneration process, no problem. That became the difference in it's like, that's the old saying, there are no incurable diseases, but there are a lot of incurable people. And it's because their thinking is, it's just incorrect.
To get more on the science of how emotional health affects the body, I met with my new friend, Dr. Carrie Madej. Carrie's like an encyclopedia of studies on the effects of all the things that cause the body to flourish. And we spent a lot of time talking about frequencies, both electromagnetic frequencies for treatment, but also emotions we create that affect healing.
You know, medicine, in my opinion, and science has purposely tried to mislead us from understanding our bodies and how miraculous they are. For instance, we always know pH of a body or pH of something. That's how much acid or base is in something. Well, really what we should be saying is voltage. It really is voltage, which is electricity. But in my opinion, they didn't want you to know that you are an electrical, powerful magnetic being, so they changed the word to pH. But we really are voltage. We know that too little voltage, you will get disease in that area, pain, etc. You can measure the voltage and you'll know exactly what's going on in the human body. Of course, too high could be something like seizures, etc., an imbalance. So if you know that we're really voltage, electrical beings, and we can measure that through the EKG, the EEG, and other ways, then that makes sense to know that we are going to interact with other electrical frequencies. And frequency is energy. So electricity has energy, right? So everything has energy around us. We're going to interact with that. And we know that. So we know that things can affect us. Let's say people are familiar with 5G and how that energy frequency is not conducive to health in human or really any life. And that we have to be very careful with it because that's affecting us. But it's a two-way communication. We affect things as well. So frequency, energy, vibration, to me, they're all the same thing when I'm talking about that, but that is the essence, the core of what all life is based on. So that's why I love Nikola Tesla's quote, everything is energy, frequency, vibration. That's the secrets of the universe, right? So we're looking at the frequency. Now we can measure emotions. We can measure the energy of an emotion, the frequency. And we know fear is on the lowest level of the scale. And then love is actually the highest frequency on the scale. And it's actually measurable. And we know that with intention, we can change things with that feeling, with that energy. We can change things around us or ourselves. And there's a plant experiment. You can take different plants, seedlings, and then do the intention, say you're bad, you're ugly to those. Don't just ignore the others, and then say beautiful things to the others. And we even did this in my school when I was growing up, and the ones that you said beautiful things to grew wonderfully. The ones you said bad things to actually were shriveled and very tiny, and the ones you didn't say anything to were just in the middle. So it's very powerful. You can do lots of experiments like that. But we don't teach people that they have that power, but we know that it's there.
Let's get back to the Zek family for a moment. We heard from Allie Now let's hear from her son, Alec, who obviously has had his own trauma to deal with. Alec had all but accepted that he was going to lose his mother as a teenager and dealt with a physically and emotionally abusive father. But watching his mom fight for her survival triggered the same response in Alec to do the work of healing. His awakening began when he was all alone in Germany, playing professional handball and didn't know a soul.
So right when that traumatic event happened, just thereafter, I went to Germany and was living in Germany playing professional handball for 4 to 6 months, really by myself with my thoughts and my feelings for the first time, no distractions except for playing handball. But the other piece of that is, and this is part of the wounding, I was back in a situation where I was made to feel unworthy again as well, because I was playing amongst a bunch of professional handball players who had been playing their entire life, and I had just picked up the sport 8 years prior. Really 6 years prior, and me being back in a situation where I was made to feel unworthy, surrounding athletics again, just like it was with basketball when I was younger, having to look at all that trauma that had just recently surfaced, I was forced to take measures. Otherwise, I would have been completely, I mean, every single day, it was a struggle to make myself want to get out of bed and go do something, because it was, the trauma was overwhelming and the experience I was experiencing was unbelievably overwhelming. So being in Germany by myself with no more distractions for me to reach on or cling on to, because I was literally just going to practice and back every single day. I didn't have a car. I was amongst a bunch of German people who didn't speak great English, and experiencing that forced me to look at my trauma and address it and name it for what it was, working with Chris Page actually. And then when I got back to the US, we lived with my mom for around 6 months. And that experience, I started working with Tammy Joyce. So after naming my trauma really well with Chris and addressing it for what it was and experiencing some of the feelings associated with him, with Tammy, I really started to learn steps to heal after addressing and naming the trauma. And that was emotional freedom technique, journaling, actually writing down every experience that I had, talking with her through every experience that I had. And then at the end, doing this ceremonial thing where I set those experiences on fire as a sort of way to absolve myself of any attachment emotionally to them and really heal every single piece of trauma that I had experienced. And the main piece really was understanding who Alec Zeck is, not what other people want Alec Zeck to be, not what other people want Alec Zeck to say, not what my dad had told me when I was younger. I am not those things. And connecting with my inner child, a lot of it was inner child work, and really like having compassion and understanding for what I experienced as a child, and almost talking to myself in a way and saying, Alec, I love you. Like pretending that I was, or imagining that I was holding my younger self and telling my younger self what I needed to hear at that time to validate me. And I think my no more thing that I will never allow to happen, at least in my sphere of influence, is another person or entity imposing their will or way of thinking or perception onto that of another person. As long as we are living from a place of love and compassion, and as long as we have taken steps to individually heal and work through our own trauma, we should be encouraged to freely express as we choose in this life, no question. And anyone trying to take away your authenticity or your authentic voice, or suppress or impose their will upon you, like I had my entire childhood, is not for you. And that is my no more. I will not allow that in my sphere of influence.
Alec was able to translate his pain into a worldwide modern-day civil rights movement by forming Health Freedom for Humanity, comprised of doctors, attorneys, and activists to preserve the health freedom rights of everyone and not let anybody impose their will on a person's right to choose what's best for them. And he did it without abandoning himself in the process. Next, I made my way down to Miami, Florida to meet with Dr. Kelly Brogan. After hearing about her work with Ali Zeck, I wanted to find out more about the process of getting people off psych meds, and particularly kids in their 20s. Can we detox kids from the most intense psych meds out there?
Yes, we do. I believe that anybody has the capacity to taper off of any cocktail combination of psychiatric medications, and I have evidence for that, including multi-decade exposure. Now, what makes it so that someone can access that capacity, right? Because not everybody can. And there are as many, for every case I have, including published cases in the medical literature, I've published case reports, case series, randomized trials. And for every one of those that I have that says, yes, you can not only come off these medications, resolve dependency on, this cocktail of chemicals, even if you've been exposed for many years, but then you can actually come into a state of vitality that was not accessible to you when you were medicated. For every one of those cases, there's a case where somebody tried to come off and went right back on, right? Or came off and 6 months later, a year later, decided they feel worse than ever and need to run back to the doctor. So what is the difference, between those two cohorts? And I do believe, that it is a willingness to do the work that the dark night of the soul asks of us. And I'm not sure, I'm certainly not a child psychiatrist, but I'm not sure that there's anyone who is too young to do this work, that it's suited to, the soul that's being confronted with the conditions. Although I imagine that it's certainly more available for those who are past their adolescence, right? And most of the patients that I've worked with have been in their late 30s or, mid to late 40s. And that is a window of maturational development that really lends itself to what is often described as individuation. This is largely a Jungian concept that there is a point at which we pick up the pieces of ourself that we have hidden because we knew that they wouldn't bring love and approval from our conditionally loving caregivers. And we collect them in service of an experience of our own wholeness, which is, of course, the only way we step out of the labyrinth of, the illusory self and step into an experience of ourself that is, really predicated on okayness, on love, on acceptance, that will carry us through no matter what happens. So who is ready to do that hero's journey and who is not? I don't know. But when you are ready, it is a process that unfolds that never feels beyond what you can handle. And that is not to say that it is not harrowing and difficult and that there aren't moments of doubt. But ultimately, there's this meta sense of, I've got this, right? The reclamation of consciousness from these chemicals involves learning how to feel emotions, right? Learning how to feel them. And that kind of emotional development takes time. It takes practice. And developing a relationship to the self that could be described as mastery involves the capacity to self-soothe, right? So I often talk to my patients about turning towards their little girl self, right? What would you say to her? In fact, I have a 9-year-old and I tell her the same thing, right? And so she has, she's very empathic and she gets, worried and anxious and sensitive. And we say, turn towards little Nellie, that's what we call her, and take care of her. Tell her, it's totally okay. Look around. Everything is safe here. And the story is telling you that it's not because it's linked to something that is about to happen or something that has happened, but actually in this moment, we're okay, you're okay. And that kind of self-soothing is not something we ever learned. Why? Because we were told, stop crying and go to your room, you're annoying me, or, you're not getting with the program, do as I say, and other forms of totalitarian, authoritarian parenting, or worse, we were beaten or abused or neglected. And so this concept of conditional access to love is very much ingrained in our nervous systems, right? In our experience of safety and danger. And we have to begin to understand that we can handle the imagined experience of rejection. And in fact, when you own whatever it is that you might have done to try to avoid it, including take a medication, including telling a lie or committing a crime or who knows what, right? If we own that, it's all okay then, right? Once we take that responsibility, something shifts and we disengage from that power struggle of pretending that we are this person so that we can get the pretend love of somebody who's also pretending, right? It's just a whole game. And so once we step out of that, it's hugely liberating. And that practice, is a multi-year practice, I would say.
I wanted so badly to cross the border into Canada for my next guest, Xavier Dagba, but travel restrictions didn't allow it. So Xavier and I met online and filmed it that way. Xavier is an emotional spiritual coach. We talked about shadow work and the process of loving our authentic selves. I didn't realize when the meeting started, but I needed some help with the process of losing my wife.
My experience with my wife was that I was a bit of an enabler.
Yeah.
I enabled her addiction, which oddly enough, her addiction was to keeping silent about everything that happened to her.
Yeah.
And she used her job as a means of sinking all of her energy and looking really good as a way of avoiding. And she put all of her energy into her children to really love them as best she could as a way of avoiding. And my own view was, oh, she's out there killing it. She's crushing it. She's doing the greatest job. And then cancer came, and cancer showed us something's wrong. But then it came roaring back because she hadn't dealt with any of this emotional stuff over here.
Yeah.
She was still avoiding it. Yeah. And I'm watching this whole thing. And I'm thinking to myself, how is this playing out this way? We're doing everything perfect.
Yeah.
I thought we're both facing our shadows. We're both in 12-step programs. We're both doing the greatest nutrition, and still she dies. And for me, that was this eye-opening experience of, oh my God, I've been enabling a fantasy of what life is, as opposed to maybe challenging her, challenging myself to go on a deeper level. I wasn't even aware that I still had this fantasy that I was trying to play out. And when she died, for me, that was finally the end of this fantasy and the realization that, oh my God, I'm so much more than this fantasy life that I thought. So I just want to get your feedback on any of those things I mentioned right in there.
The first question is, can you love the part of you that wasn't aware?
Oh man, you're not kidding. Yes, that is a tough one, right? And I'm still working on that one.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is so many different layers and some brilliant awareness of just understanding that innate intelligence in the body that knows how to work around dysfunction or dis-ease. And this beautiful awareness of just there is so much more that needs to be done on the nutritional side, which is rare, and I just have to give you credit for that. And there is a huge part of not addressing the emotional root of dis-ease that, in my opinion, can be so challenging because it hijacks the healing process of the body. It's as if we are in this society where we are so conditioned about dimming the symptoms, addressing the symptoms, and not understanding the true causalities. And have you been an enabler? The true answer that comes up for me out of everything that you say is if she were married to who you are today. If she was alive and married to who you are today with everything you know, yes. But the version of you that you were loved his life, loved his wife. And I believe that man did every single thing he could. And with that condition, no one can be seen as an enabler. An enabler for me is someone that is looking at a situation that is saying, oh, I know this is wrong. I know there's something wrong here. I actually know what is wrong here, but I'll shut my mouth. That is an enabler. If she was married to who you are today, and you had decided, well, I know there is emotional stuff that she has to work through, but I just won't say anything so that I don't hurt her feelings. I just won't say anything because it would be really painful for her. I won't say anything because I'm afraid she will look at me as the villain. I won't say anything because this would be you being an enabler. And when I look at the whole story, it is so important, in my opinion, to honor the love that she had for you and the love that you have for her. To shed that identity of the enabler, because it doesn't feel, by any means, it doesn't feel like you were close to being an enabler.
Well, then, how do you live with the fact that you couldn't stop somebody you love from dying?
Yeah. You love it.
Tell me more.
You love it. You love the version of you that back then didn't have any clue about what was really going on. You love the version of her that wasn't ready or willing or that didn't choose to dive into the emotional baggage that she was carrying. You love the man that you have become, that is using that pivotal moment in his journey to choose to make some more, to make some good out of it. But especially the man that you used to be, that is still holding on to the blame, the guilt of not doing, or that is still taking the responsibility, the fault of seeing his loved one, pass away and not being able to do something about it. And that sounds like a powerful reconciliation process. You know, there is this thing that people in the islands in Hawaii do. They call it Ho'oponopono. I am sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. And when you do that to a part of you, like literally you look at a shadow, you observe a shadow, you look at a part of you that is holding on to the guilt, the blame, and everything else that you are putting on that part of you, and you go through that process. I am sorry I've been using you as a scapegoat for the passing of my wife. I'm sorry I've been making you the bad guy. I'm sorry I've been considering you as an enabler. I'm sorry I've been thinking you didn't try hard enough. I'm sorry I've been believing that you let her down. I'm sorry I've been so harsh on you. This conversation between you and that part of you, you and the Jeff that was back there, that was also just lost in like trying to find a solution, trying to find an outcome, but not having access to it for one reason or the other. Please forgive me for shaming you for so long. Please forgive me for holding on to this pain eventually as a way to punish you. Please forgive me for guilting you. Please forgive me. And now thank you for doing the best you could. I know you tried. I trust you tried. I trust you did everything you knew was possible. Like this little process, when you apply it with a shadow part, and just like learning and really having that reconciliation. Because we can try to find meaning, whereas the only meaning is love. We can try to give understanding to the ego. We can try to find like reasons why that would discount you from the guilt and the blame and the shame and everything. And the only thing that would actually discount you of all of that would be love. And the outcome of shadow work, in my opinion, is a deeper experience of love. It's as if you have this container where light was only able to reach halfway through the container because of everything that was inside, because of this kind of like dark layer that would keep light from going all the way down. And the more we begin to strip these layers, the more light is able to dive in deeper. The more the heart is able to expand even more. The more we are able to hold more light in the body. And this is the outcome, in my opinion. The more you can look at this version of you, look at this man that you used to be and be like, man, we did the best we could. I'm just sorry. I'm sorry we couldn't stop it.
You know, it's funny, as you and I went through this experience right now of me diving into my emotions and feeling the forgiveness, which, thank you for that. Every cell in my body right now feels relaxed. It feels at peace. I feel open to the universe.
Yeah.
And so much of disease, in my experience, is this irritation emotionally that the body feels and doesn't know how to resolve it.
Yeah.
And so the body has to go into this hyperdrive, creating all these toxins.
Yeah.
It's trying to push off all this stuff, and so the body is working too hard.
Yeah.
And when we do the work that we do, it's an opportunity to finally sink into this place of connectedness to the universe where we're at peace.
Yeah.
Maybe